Tips from Trestle is brought to you by the Belter Companies, Navigator Group Purchasing, and eMenu Choice Point of Sale. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. During 3 decades in the hospitality industry, I focused my work on creating exceptional experiences for the customers we serve. My goal for this podcast? Educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By creating hospitality with a purpose, by bringing the customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Today on Tips from Trestle, I'm joined by Katie Griffith. Katie started Bright Solutions, a technology consulting firm exclusively serving senior living 8 years ago when she saw a need for senior living providers to have an unbiased third party help them evaluate and implement technology in their communities. Katie, thanks for joining me again on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk to you about residents and how they embrace technology and getting them to use technology. You know, we had a conversation earlier this year. You came on the cocktails and conversations that I host with the Florida Senior Living Association, and your presentation was awesome. And so I wanted to maybe do a little deeper dive on that. And so when you think about getting residents to embrace new technologies, right? We're very much as an industry trying to get past this mindset of avoiding technology, right? Like we're really starting to embrace technology. How do we use it? How can we make it better? And how do we get residents engaged with it? And so, kind of give me some of your ideas, or where do we even start, I guess, when we want to start talking about residents and technology and getting them to be more comfortable and engaged with it?
Sure. So we start with meeting residents where they are. And I'll say, one good thing that came out of the pandemic, there's so many bad things, so it completely wasn't worth the good thing, but but a good thing that came out of it is that a lot of seniors started using technology. So that's awesome because, they probably are, more of them are familiar than they were before the pandemic. So, but, meet them where they are and understand that it's not always based on age. Like you're just going to have different personalities in your community of people that are tech savvy. You have it with your employees too. But residents that are tech savvy, residents that are just don't want anything to do with tech. They want to make a phone call. They want to, watch TV. And that's about it, and read their paper, their actual paper. Right.
Yeah.
And you have what I call tech comfortable. So they're somewhere in between, and so we want to, encourage our residents to know that we're okay with that. We're okay with where they are, and we're not going to force, them to start using technology. But we also do want to encourage them to get a little bit out of their comfort zone. So, one tip that someone mentioned to me that I just thought was a great idea is that if you have one of those residents that just reads their paper on the paper, just makes phone calls, doesn't want any kind of tech, and says, I don't do technology.
Yeah.
You can encourage them by saying, that remote control that you use for your television, that's kind of advanced technology. Let's face
Yeah.
it. Those things are crazy.
Yeah.
So, it can really just give them that courage to say, yeah, you're right. But we can talk more about, how do we get them, but we do want to, somewhat challenge them to push their boundaries out of their comfort zone a little bit. But
Yeah,
we're never going to say you're required to have a smartphone or something like
right.
that.
Yeah, I think it's so important, right? Because what you're saying about meeting them where they're at and understanding that the even though maybe our residents are between the ages of, we'll say, 78 to 85, right? Just as a kind of general age gap. A lot of times people think, well, yeah, they're quote unquote old people who don't use technology, where that's really not the case, right? You can't put every resident in that same box, right? And so stepping out of that and saying, well, no, there are plenty of residents who embrace technology. They're very forward thinking. And then, like you said, they're the ones that maybe do fit that stereotype, but it's not a homogenous uh, group when it comes to technology. I think it's so important to have that mindset. And so, um,
Yeah, and understand their interest level. It's more about, their interest level, not always their ability. Because in their career and in their life, they've either been those innovators, that some of them have been those innovators, and some of them have different gifts. And so yeah, it's kind of a personality thing.
yeah, it's funny because I think about, I saw somewhere somebody was talking about they're talking about airplanes, right? And the idea that there was a generation of people that lived from no planes in the sky to us landing humans on the moon. It was 66 years, right? And so our residents, they experienced a lot of that kind of transition. So, like you said, there's plenty of people who are experienced and are able. It's just
Right.
not necessarily everyone. So, one of the things that when you talked to the group earlier on the webinar, it, we had talked about like resident technology committees. And so I'm curious what that looks like. And I think our listeners would be curious how a concept like that, we have dining committees, we have programming committees in our communities. These are things that aren't foreign to us, right? And so I think inherently the idea of a resident technology committee makes sense. But how is it different than some of those other committees? And how could someone in their community capitalize on having a group like that? Today, I want to tell you about one of Tressel's senior living partners, Belter. Belter is a food service design, equipment, and supply company that has been providing expert guidance to the food and beverage industry for nearly a century. A strategic partner to the most successful food service operations in the country, Belter provides support in kitchen and bar design, equipment procurement and install, and supplies. Their team of senior living food service experts have experience across the continuum of care. From independent living to skilled nursing and CCRCs, Belter specializes in right-sizing new facilities, modernizing remodels, and providing the right food service equipment and supplies. At Belter, they are committed to creating memorable experiences for their customers and their guests. With their top-notch team and a global network of quality supplier partners, their customer-focused approach is built on a foundation of collaboration and decades of industry experience. So thank you for considering Belter for all of your food service needs.
Great. I love it when providers have their residents have formed a technology committee, because they do such wonderful work for the community and for the residents. And the ones that I worked with, it varies depending on the resident population and what they're excited about doing, but they meet regularly and they're talking about their personal use of technology and how to help encourage their friends at the community to get more comfortable with the technology they have. So a lot of them, have a family member that gave them an iPad and they're just not comfortable with it. So that committee a lot of times is providing training and resources and one-on-one help to those residents living there that have these gadgets that they're not comfortable with yet. So it's such a wonderful engagement opportunity, and development opportunity just right there with the residents. But I've been on more than one project where the technology committee is the whole reason that the organization is investing in a resident engagement platform, because the committee just on their own went and did demos and evaluated the
Oh,
different options
wow.
out there, came up with their criteria and what they want in a platform. So, I mean, they're doing some great things out there. And when you're rolling out a new technology, even if you don't have a resident tech committee, that's where I would start. So you want to leverage them when you're rolling out a new platform or a new app or opportunity for residents to use technology in your community. Leverage that technology committee to come on this journey with you and help you get them onto the new technology. And even if you don't have one, you can talk to the resident council, the dining committee, and say, hey, we're excited about this new technology. Here's all the great things, the reasons why you should be excited about it. Who wants to come with us and be early adopters? So it's really important to use a resident champion approach.
Yeah.
So you want to have a handful of selected resident champions to be the first adopters of the technology. Maybe it's a mobile app that, like with one of the resident engagement platforms where they can see what's on the menu, see what's activities are happening, and maybe place an order online for food or make a reservation. So have those early adopters, but you want to hand select them. Don't just get all your tech savvy residents to try it out. You do want some of them, but you also want those residents that aren't as comfortable with technology, but are willing
Mhm.
to try. They've got to be kind of, if they're an influencer in your community, that's really helpful, but they're not as tech savvy at all, but they're willing to try and they're optimistic and willing to give it a shot, because that's awesome once you roll it out to the rest of the residents and they'll say, oh, well, if Katie can do it, then I think I can try it out too. So if
Yeah.
they just see all the tech savvy people doing it, they're like, yeah, of course they figured it out. So
Yeah. One question I had on that was when you think about from an operator's perspective, you're in there, you're getting that resident community built, but now you're bringing these vendors in who, while a lot of them are familiar with the industry, some, a lot of them have maybe even worked in the industry. How should that look? What should an operator do to facilitate communication, collaboration, between a resident tech committee and the vendors the vendor or vendors that they're looking at for a platform?
sure. So that's a great question. And it's important for the community to stay in the driver's seat and, make sure that we're selecting the right technology for the community and for the residents. And also stay in the driver's seat even when the vendor comes to deploy the platform with you, of what your strategy is around adoption. So, it's not up to the vendor, and they're not really going to spend a whole bunch of time, you know, with your resident champions and really curating that whole process.
Mm.
They will provide support and help, but you want to be in the driver's seat of that. Don't just assume they're going to do that. And, oh yeah, here's a couple of residents I think should try it out first. Just, you need to be in the driver's seat of that. As far as choosing the platform, we can involve the residents, and then, also communicate with them of why, this particular platform is the right fit for everyone. And residents are usually very understanding of, oh yeah, that, just tell them, just tell
Yeah.
them the reasons, and
Yeah.
and and obviously you want to get something that they're going to like too. So but the other thing too is the vendor's going to come help with their platform, but there's a lot of training that you can offer your residents even before they come. So let's say it is a mobile app. Well, let's get them some basic, just smartphone training before that,
Yeah.
and do they remember how, like, their Apple ID if they have an iPhone? Do they understand the difference between the iPhone experience versus the Android? Because if you start talking about an Apple ID, the Android owners are like, what are you talking about? So, helping them know what to expect as far as how to download a new app. A lot of times I run into they didn't know that they needed a password because their daughter set up the phone for them and never gave
Yeah.
them the password. So getting prepared for all of that ahead of time and giving them some extra training. And there's some organizations out there that are specific to our industry. Like everyone knows Abby Ritchie.
Yeah. I was just thinking of
She has,
Abby while you were saying that.
yeah, she has Senior Savvy, and they can do that for you. Just do some of those prep sessions and trainings. Can Do Tech is another one where they are specific to our industry. They know how to train seniors on technology. I don't recommend calling Microsoft or like to come train, or
Yeah.
the vendor. I mean, even the vendor. I mean, even vendors that are providing resident engagement platforms, they don't usually have trainers that can train an 85-year-old. They can train an administrator,
Yeah. No,
So,
exactly. One of the things that I was curious about when you think about engaging residents with this, having many years of experience with dining committees and knowing that if you're not careful, residents, especially ones that are, a ton of residents with business experience who were leaders in their organizations. And so sometimes whether it's good or not, there's a tendency for them to want to take over the project, right? They're like, well, you asked for our input. Well, we should just, it's for us. We're going to manage it. We're going to do it. What would you say to operators? How would you have them walk that line of being great support and getting great feedback and avoiding that kind of taking over of a project by a resident committee?
absolutely. So, um, leverage, take advantage of the expertise and their understanding of what your resident population wants. Absolutely capitalize on that, but have boundaries. And you can set these boundaries with your residents. And I think that providers know that. I mean, they do that all day long, right? We're doing
Yeah,
it all day long. And especially even, in the dining areas and hospitality, it's like, no, you can't just grab the bushel of bananas and take them back to your apartment. So you've got all the all these boundaries that you need to set. So you can set those and you decide, how much involvement do we want them to have and where do we really need to draw the line? And then, of course, you can just use your wonderful communication skills to set, uh, compassionately set those boundaries and hold tight to them. I've seen communities, the tail's wagging the dog and they're just like, okay, okay, okay. And all right, but I don't recommend that.
yeah,
But we have had some really great projects where we have brought in the tech committee, and there are different kind of struggles along the way, but ultimately we're able to please everyone, the administration and the residents, where they feel like, wow, the organization really listened to us, and we're the reason that our residents get to have this technology now. And they just feel, the amount of pride that they have and they should have to see it come to fruition.
yeah.
This idea that usually it's been a year or more that they've been talking about it as a committee, and then to see it come to fruition and all the other residents just thank them and appreciate so much what they've done. And also at the same time, we've set those boundaries and made sure that it's something that is good for the organization.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Definitely
no,
a
I was
little
gonna,
tightrope, and
yeah.
but
Well, I wanted to ask you a couple of things about that. One, when you think about the buy-in from residents on embracing, not residents on the committee, but residents in general, um, I'm going to make an assumption that usually if you have this tech committee and they're involved and engaged, you're going to get higher buy-in from a resident population than if it's, hey, here's our new portal. This is how it works. Good luck. Let us know if you need help with it. What have you seen on that? Is it a lot? Is it a little? Like what's kind of been your general takeaway from that?
Navigator is the largest full-service GPO that exclusively focuses on the senior living community. And what that means is we provide products and services that help our members provide a great environment for their residents, such as like MRO, hospitality equipment, food, business products, as well as technology solutions. We actually surround our members with a level of support unmatched in the industry.
I would say that you're really going to struggle with adoption, you know, of any relevance. If you're just, you know, stuffing a flyer in their mailbox with the instructions of how to download the app, or, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
Um, so you definitely have to be forward thinking and strategic about it. So yeah, I mean, I would say, your adoption levels are going to be very low, and so then you're maintaining this system. So let's say it's online ordering, you're updating the menus and the hours of when they can order,
yeah.
for what, for five people that that
Right.
might.
Is the effort and the investment of time and dollars on the technology worth it for the benefit of the community? No, and that makes a lot of sense.
You're gonna see by maximizing that adoption right out the gate, just from day one, you're going to realize a return on your investment much more quickly. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, no, and and having that, like you said, that resident champion for the technology, you're probably not going to be able to create that person or those people without more engagement in the process, other than
Yeah.
here's a sneak peek of what we're doing. We want you to help us sell it to other residents. So,
So we have, I mean, this one launch we did, the tech committee actually created a whole education plan on the platform where they can get degrees. Like you can get your
really,
doctorate.
wow. See, and
Yeah.
that's very cool. And I'm guessing because that was a resident-led thing, a resident-driven thing, it was way more uh, engaging, and that adoption probably was significantly higher than not.
Yes, absolutely. So and it doesn't just end when you go live. Like, let's continue the education, and that's what they're doing. And another option for education and training is your local universities. So get some volunteers or interns from probably more volunteers, uh, or even the high schools. Like, I know our high school nearby, the to graduate, you have to have a certain number of community, volunteer hours.
Right.
So get them over there to do some sessions with your residents and helping them with their devices.
Yeah, no, very cool. One question I wanted to ask you about the committees. When you do you find that committees that are project based, like we're going to roll out this new software or this new app or whatever, and this committee is going to help us with this one rollout. Are those committees less effective than, say, we're just going to have a standing tech committee, and kind of like you do with your dining committees, and they're going to help, yeah, they'll help with new product rollouts and new apps and things of that nature, but then maybe they also help address some of like the education like you're talking about. Which of those have you found? Are they both effective, or are they different approaches? I guess talk to me a little bit about how those two different types of committees might look and how they could be effective.
Yeah, so I think it depends on your resident population and what that, committee looks like, how it's been formed. But having them be project focused really helps with an effective rollout. I it's if they're too involved in the evaluation process, that can be, you really want to capture that early on. So if you realize that your technology committee has been researching, these engagement platforms or whatever it might be, you really want to get involved early on, because if they've spent 6 months, 3 months evaluating, and they've all decided kind of in their mind already, like, this is
Oh
the
yeah.
greatest. And you know they, and even administration, and a lot of what I help people see is, they don't realize the implications of the different options that are out there. So,
Right.
they're just seeing it from one lens, and also the salespeople are really good at making it look,
Yeah, no,
amazing.
absolutely.
So there's just things they don't realize, but getting in there early in that evaluation process, and still don't shut them out and say, no, we'll figure this out, but get involved right away so that you can have influence over that is really important. But yeah, having a tech committee that has a good relationship with the wider resident population is really just makes your life so much easier. And really, because of all of those surrounding opportunities, besides just this specific platform we're trying to roll out,
Yeah.
um, of just getting residents generally comfortable with the basics of the technologies that they're using in their home.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I mean, it feels like there's a need and a place for both kind of forms of a committee, and that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
As we kind of come to a close here today, what have we not talked about when it comes to resident technology adoption? What's the one thing that maybe we haven't talked about that we just want to make sure the listeners know, or at least are considering as they take this big challenge on?
Sure. I think one of the things that maybe we didn't really touch on is, and again, these committees really help with this communication. High communication with the residents as the new deployment approaches is so important. FAQs, and you're going to keep updating those FAQs because
Yeah.
they will evolve. What is this that's coming? Because, the rumors start flying, and so you want to be ahead of the communications, and how are we messaging this project to our residents so that they don't just decide what the messaging is, and then celebrate. So you want to have a big launch party, um, and you want to decide, like, do we get them up and running on the app and then have just a party? I've seen that where, there's food and all kinds of stuff, and then like awards ceremony of, giving awards to the resident committee members who helped to make this happen, and just really celebrating their success. Or it's like launch party and one-on-one support, so you do need to have that hands-on support at that initial push. You want as many residents as you can to get on that initial push. And so taking the time, getting those volunteers from the university or whatever to come and help you and say, bring your smartphone, bring your iPad, bring your laptop. We're going to help you get the initial thing, logged into and
Yeah.
downloaded, because that's always the biggest, hardest part. And once they're in there, it's, usually these things are so easy to use, but, really just taking the extra effort to do that initial hands-on help.
Perfect. Well, Katie, this has been a fascinating conversation. It's technology, like we said at the start, like it's bearing down on us as an industry, and we know we got to make sure that what we're doing involves the residents. And so all of this insight on getting residents to adopt technology and having them be a part of the process, I think is going to be super helpful for the entire industry. So thanks again for your time today and for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Aaron.
So there you have it, another one in the books. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.